Hi, my name is Sam. Today I am going to speak to someone from my family called Tom, who is an Antarctic field guide. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Sam. How are you?
Good.
Cool.
Can I ask you some questions that my friends from school would like me to ask you?
That's fine. Go ahead.
What was your job and what did you have to do in your job?
All right, really good question, Sam. So my job with the British Antarctic Survey was a field guide. So basically, scientists fly from all over the world to Antarctica, and they come so they can do experiments, basically. And that most of the experiments they're doing is they're looking at climate change because the Earth's warming up, but nobody wants to believe it. And all the governments around the world don't want to believe that the world is warming up. So the scientists are there to prove that that's what's happening. Okay, so they come down there and they take lots of samples and they dig these big channels in the ice and they pull up the ice cores and they test them to see how much oxygen is in them and all that sort of thing. And then they feed that information back. Okay, so it's my job to take those scientists out onto the ice and look after them, because most of them haven't really spent a lot of time in a tent, and certainly none of them have spent time in Antarctica where it's really cold. So my job is to look after them, basically. And I've got a background in mountaineering, so I'm kind of used to the cold and dealing with harsh weather and camping in it as well. So I take care of them and look after them, basically.
How did you travel there?
Okay, so I basically flew to Antarctica. It takes about 36 hours from here to Antarctica if you just fly continuously. So I flew to Madrid, and then I flew to Punta Arenas. And then we flew across the Drake Channel to Antarctica, basically. That takes 36 hours if there's no delays with the weather. Some people take a ship to Antarctica. Okay, so they'll sail in, and that takes about 2 to 3 months from the UK. And they'll stop off at various places and pick up food and things like that, which are going to get dropped off in Antarctica at the bases when they get there. So yeah, there's different ways of going there. I flew all the way.
Where did you live?
Where did I live? Okay, well, various places. So the British Antarctic Survey have actually got 4 bases in Antarctica. And the first is called Rothera. And I spent quite a lot of time at Rothera. That's where I did my winters. And then they've got another base called Halley, which is the one that most people will recognize. It kind of looks like a massive spaceship sitting on the ice. And it's actually built on skis, so it can be moved around. And we did have to move it, actually, because there was a massive crack that opened up. And then I lived in the field as well, which means basically being in a tent away from base.
And what was it like to live there?
It was amazing to live there. Okay, so you've got on base, there's like hot showers 24 hours a day. There's a really good chef who cooks for us all the time. There's a cinema. There's what's called the green room, where there's lots of instruments. They've got loads of guitars and drums and pianos and amps, so you can make a band. We actually started a band. That was really cool. And they've got a massive library, and they've got a massive media drive full of films and music. So you're never going to get bored on base. And then people run like yoga classes and do lectures. And we used to take people climbing because there was some mountains nearby, right? So, you know, there's lots to do on base, and it's very comfortable. It's really nice and warm. And then the other side of my job was living in the field. Okay, and in the field means away from base, and often it's just flat white with some mountains occasionally, but usually it's just flat white, and it's ice everywhere, full of crevasses, which are these big gaps in the ice. And we would pitch our tents, dig them in so they didn't blow away because it gets really windy. And we'd pitch our pyramid tents and we'd dig them in, and we'd dig a toilet as well. And we'd get our skidoos there and line them all up against the wind so that they didn't get buried with snow when it dumped with snow. Okay, and it would be cold and hard work. You know, if it did snow, everything would bury in snow and we'd have to dig it out. So we did so much digging of snow, like uncovering the skidoos every single morning when we wanted to go and use them, digging out the toilet tent every time we wanted to go to the toilet because it would fill with snow. So yeah, quite hard work, but really amazing. And then we would take the scientists and we would drive around the ice and we would look at doing their experiments. Sometimes it was digging up some like weather station so they could take the data off it. Sometimes it was taking ice core samples. Sometimes it was looking at melt pools, which are these big pools of water that have started appearing in Antarctica that haven't been there before because it's getting warmer, basically. And we would just look after them. It's a really dangerous place if you don't know what you're doing, basically. It's dangerous if you do know what you're doing, but it's really serious. So we just look after everybody and make sure they got back to the tent in the evening. We'd cook them some food, make sure they were hydrated, put them to bed, and that would be our day done. So yeah, there you
go. What was the longest time you went without having a shower?
Oh, good question. The longest time I went without having a shower, it was about 3 months when I worked on a project. There's no shower in the field. You know, it's not like being on base. What I did do was, you know, every now and then I would take most of my clothes off and lie down in the snow and like rub myself with snow to try and clean myself, or heat a pan of water on the stove and kind of try and like just splash myself with it, but it didn't do much. So yeah, 3 months without a shower. There you go. Quite smelly for sure.
Did you have any snowball fights?
We never had a snowball fight. I think it's because there's so much snow there that as soon as everyone sees it, they're like, well, you know, there's no novelty to having a snowball fight there, really, because there's just snow everywhere. It's not like in the UK where it dumps with snow and everyone's like, oh yeah, let's have a snowball fight. We just didn't do that, really. So no.
How cold was it?
Okay, well, in the summer, when it's 24-hour daylight and it never goes dark, it was on average about -5 degrees Celsius. Some days it would go above freezing, and it actually rained a few times in the middle of summer, believe it or not. And then it would occasionally go down to like -10 if a storm came through, right? So it was okay. It was not too bad. In the winter, it went to about -20 on average, but occasionally would get down to -40 or -50, or sometimes would go as warm as -10. So quite a big difference, really.
How did you keep warm? What did you have to wear particularly on your feet?
Okay, good question. So to keep warm in that kind of conditions, basically we had a few rules out there, really important safety rules. The main one was in Antarctica, you don't really go out if there's a storm because it gets incredibly cold because of what's called wind chill. The wind chill hits your skin and just strips the heat out of it. And I actually got a little bit of frostbite on my cheek here where I'd missed a little gap between my mask and my goggles, you know, because you have to check that every single bit of skin is covered all the time in the middle of winter. So some of the clothes, I've just got a few things to show you here. These are bathing boots. They're just like a massive slipper. They're really loose on your foot. And that means that they're not constricting your foot and trapping the blood. So they're really warm, just a massive, super warm slipper with lots of insulation. And then we have these things, which are down jackets, and these are what people use on the big mountains of the world, like Mount Everest and K2. And these are, I won't be able to have this on for very long because it's so warm, but I just put it on. Oh my gosh, gross. Has an awkward zip, as you can see. There you go. Oh. So it's got this huge hood on it as well. So obviously you lose most of your heat out of your head. And it's like the most important thing is to keep your head warm when it's cold, and to cover all of your skin. So I would have on, underneath this, I would have on thermals, and I would have on a fleece, and then I'd have on another down jacket, a bit thinner than this one. And then I'd have this on, and then I'd wear a face mask, which would cover my nose, a bit like the masks that we have to wear at the moment because of coronavirus. I'd have a mask that would cover everything apart from my eyes, and then I'd wear goggles over my eyes and make sure there's no skin anywhere. And then I would get a friend to check that no skin is showing anywhere so that I didn't get any frostbite or anything like that. Okay, this is incredibly warm right now. Like I'm starting to sweat in it, so I'm just going to take it off. But yeah, lots of clothes basically. And the most important thing in some ways about staying warm is to actually be hydrated. So you need to drink plenty of water when you're down there. It's so dry that all your moisture just gets evaporated to the air, and you end up really dehydrated.
We saw the video online of your wedding. How cold was it when you got married, and how long did you stay outside in your wedding clothes?
Yeah, so me and Julie got married in Antarctica, which was really cool. We were very, very fortunate to be given that opportunity, really. So yeah, the day of the wedding, it was about -15, so quite a warm day for winter. But we normally be wearing our down jackets, right? But we couldn't do that for the wedding photo shoot because it wouldn't have looked good. So we actually just got dressed up. Julie had her dress and I had my suit, and we basically went outside. And we took a snowcat, which is this big machine with 4 tracks on it that can drive over the snow. And we drove it down away from the base to where the light was quite good. And we got out and we took some shots. And we were only outside for maybe 5 minutes before we had to get back into the snowcat where the heater was going, warm ourselves up. And all the time we were wearing the bathing boots. Okay, we couldn't get away with wearing anything other than these on our feet. There was no question about wearing suits, shoes or anything, or Julie in high heels. There's just no way that was happening. It was cold, pretty cold, but we got it done, and it was good. And I think the pictures look pretty good, I think, anyway. So yeah, there you go.
How long did it take to make the wedding dress?
I think it took Julie 3 weeks with a little bit of help from a friend. Julie does a lot of clothes tailoring, so she makes a lot of clothes. She does a lot of knitting and things. So she took a tent. It was an old pyramid tent that we were retiring because it had been damaged by wind. Right? We couldn't use it in the field anymore. So she cut it up and she sewed it into a dress, basically, which is what the red bit, the orange bit on the bottom, that's the actual fabric of the pyramid tent, and the top is the inside fabric of the pyramid tent. So yeah, it took her about 3 weeks to make it, and yeah, I think she was quite proud of it, actually. I think she looked pretty good. So.
And we've been learning about animals that live in the Arctic and Antarctic, such as penguins, orcas, and polar bears. What animals did you say? Were there any scary animals?
Okay, well, there's no polar bears down there. Those guys live in the Arctic, right? So they're up north. But we did see lots of animals. Okay, so let's start with the stuff in the sea, right? So we were right next to the sea on base, so that we'd have pods of orca come round frequently during the summer. Now, remember, in winter, the sea freezes. It turns into pack ice. So those orca can't get anywhere near unless they're underneath the ice. So we didn't see anything in winter. But in the summer, the orca would come along and they'd be looking for seals because they eat seals, basically, and penguins, right? So they hunt in packs called pods. So we saw those frequently. And we saw lots of seals. So you've got different kinds of seal down there. You've got Weddell seals, and they're the cute ones with the big eyes. Okay, they're really beautiful. You've got crabby seals. Crabby seals get a really hard time because everything wants to eat them. Okay, they must taste really good or something because they just get eaten all the time, basically. And then you've got elephant seals, which are these huge creatures, and they must weigh like a ton each, the size of a car. And they'd bounce up onto base, and they'd sit there blocking the roads and stuff on base so that we couldn't get past. And they'd basically just sit there like burping and farting all day and creating a really bad smell, but you couldn't do anything about it. So yeah, we dealt with those guys. And then there's leopard seals as well. Leopard seals are a very scary animal because they hunt. They're an apex predator, which means that nothing eats them. They are right at the top of the food chain. And we have people diving in summer when the sea isn't frozen. And there's something called seal watch. So somebody will have binoculars and will be looking out for leopard seals or orca, okay, that could basically take a diver and drag them to the bottom. And if you spotted any of these animals, like a leopard seal or orca, you'd have to say, I've seen a leopard seal, and they'd just cancel it, basically, because it's just not worth the risk of diving when there's those animals around, So that was a scary animal for sure. We saw humpback whales. They would come by as well. Amazing animals, absolutely massive, okay? They were really cool. And then the marine biologists down there pulled all kinds of crazy things out of the sea. They had these luminescent starfish that they brought up to show us, which were really colourful little starfish. And they had these things called sea spiders, which I didn't know existed at all, but they are massive spiders, like the size of a dinner plate, that live on the bottom of the sea. They don't spin webs or anything, and they're actually vegetarian. They don't eat meat. So they just kind of eat like lichen and stuff like that, but they're huge things, absolutely massive. So they're pretty scary, but just because they looked a bit weird. And then on the land, you had penguins, right? There's different kinds of penguins. So you had Adelie penguins, which are the little daft looking things that have got a lot of character. Yeah. And then you've got emperor penguins. Those are the really sort of big ones with, they like look really proud, and they've got a yellow bit on their belly. And they're really beautiful, and they're really declining actually, Sam, because of global warming. They're losing a lot of their habitat. So normally there are huge colonies of emperor penguins all huddled together, and they're just disappearing, unfortunately, which is really sad. And then in the sky above you, you've got birds, things like cormorants, and you've got snow petrels, which are these beautiful white birds that are just perfectly white, so stunning to look at. So there's actually quite a lot of wildlife down there. It's really cool.
Did you ever see the penguins huddle to keep warm?
Well, we were hoping to. We were really hoping to, because normally there's a big colony of them that huddle together, but it's gone because the ice there has melted and it's taken their food, so they're not there anymore. It might be that they come back, but at the moment they're not there. So,
did you ever feed the penguins?
Well, that's definitely not allowed. So all of these animals are highly protected. In fact, Antarctica is the most protected place on Earth because of the Antarctic Treaty. So everybody that's in Antarctica, there's over 50 countries that have bases in Antarctica. They've all signed the treaty, the Antarctic Treaty. And it basically means that you're not allowed to touch or interfere with any animals whatsoever. So you're definitely not allowed to feed penguins, and you're not actually meant to get any closer than 3 meters to them. But they're really curious, so they actually come over to say hello. There's not a great deal you can do. You don't want to run away from a penguin, really. So you just stand there and they come and say hello, and then they'll waddle off once they realize you're not another penguin.
It's okay.
One final question. Do you think you will ever go back to Antarctica?
Well, I'm meant to be going back. So yes, I'm going back in October time, and I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'll be assigned to a scientist or a group of scientists who are doing some experiments somewhere, and I'll get sent out with them. So yeah, I'll be going back, and Julie, my wife, is also going back, but she's going to Greenland. Yeah, we'll be going back.
Thank you, Tom, for answering all of our questions.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sam. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.